right, let's jump straight into this explainer. When we think of Japan, we usually picture this pristine, hyper-organized society, right? But today, we're going to look right past that polished exterior to uncover the intense psychological pressures that are quietly boiling just beneath the surface. So, to really understand this paradox, we have to start with the baseline reality. Japan boasts an extraordinarily low homicide rate. We're talking just 0.3 per 100,000 people. I mean, 0.3. That literally makes it one of the absolute safest nations on the planet. You can walk the streets at night, young kids commute to school completely alone, and this deep expectation of safety, it's just woven into the very fabric of everyday life. But here's the catch. Because this baseline of safety is so incredibly high, the anomalies are exceptionally extreme. In a society that demands such absolute conformity and perfection, the rare instances where the system actually breaks down don't just result in your standard petty crime. No, they erupt into uniquely terrifying, meticulously planned, and honestly, highly disturbing events. So to understand this dark underbelly, we're going to explore 5 key themes today: the safe nation paradox, isolation and the hikikomori, toxic obsessions and subcultures, the hidden underworld, and finally, the illusion of safety. Let's kick things off with Section 1, the safe nation paradox. There is a massive clash between Japan's serene culture and its hidden modern pressures. On one hand, you've got the global public perception, right? Sacred traditions, cutting-edge tech, absolute safety, precision, and of course, the peaceful beauty of cherry blossoms. But then on the flip side, we have the hidden reality. We're looking at a population quietly grappling with crushing societal expectations, rapid demographic shifts, and severe financial debts. It's exactly this friction between expected perfection and hidden struggle that really sets the stage for our analysis. Moving right along to Section 2, isolation and the hikikomori. Now, the term hikikomori refers to a very severe form of social withdrawal. We're talking about individuals, often teens or adults, who become extreme recluses, totally unable to work or even interact with society. They might lock themselves in their rooms for years, sometimes even decades. And the thing is, in a highly honor-driven society that places immense value on economic contribution and familial duty, these individuals are often viewed as a shameful burden. This devastating stigma creates a brutal cycle of intense shame, which just pushes them even further away from the help they desperately need. And, this immense stigma can actually trigger a tragic butterfly effect. Let's look at May 2019. A reclusive man named Ryuichi attacked 19 people, mostly young kids, at a bus stop in Kawasaki before taking his own life. Well, the national media instantly sensationalized his hikikomori lifestyle, which sparked a full-blown nationwide panic about social reclusives. And then, just days later, an elderly former government official named Hideaki became absolutely terrified that his own reclusive autistic son Ichiro might commit a similar atrocity. So, driven by this media-fueled panic and deep, deep societal shame, Hideaki preemptively murdered his own son. It's a truly devastating example of how societal stigma can literally turn fatal. We see this dangerous, unchecked isolation mirrored again in the devastating Kyoto animation arson. A deeply isolated 40-year-old man, someone who had completely cut off all human contact, developed this deluded obsession that the beloved studio had actually plagiarized his novel. He literally walked in and set the studio ablaze, killing 36 people. It's such a somber reminder of a universal truth. Extreme isolation, when left entirely unchecked, can breed incredibly dangerous delusions and result in massive, unthinkable human tragedies. Which brings us to Section 3, toxic obsessions and subcultures. This kind of psychological warfare is terrifyingly evident in the case of Kabu Terauchi, who kidnapped and isolated 13-year-old Anna for 2 full years. But what makes this case so deeply, deeply disturbing is the method he used. He weaponized a phenomenon called the illusory truth effect. Basically, that's the tendency to believe false information is actually correct after repeated exposure. He repeatedly told her that her parents had completely abandoned her and wanted to sell her organs. He systematically brainwashed her into believing he was her only savior, all before she finally managed to escape from an unlocked Tokyo apartment in March 2016. And what's wild is how this kind of toxic obsession even bleeds directly from fiction right into reality. In Japanese pop culture, there's a specific character trope known as the yandere. Now, this is a character who initially depicts a really sweet, nurturing persona, but then violently and dangerously turns hyper-possessive over a love interest.
Well, in 2019, 21-year-old Yuka Takaoka embodied this trope in real life. After discovering photos of another woman on her host boyfriend's phone, she stabbed him in the abdomen. But the aftermath? That is what truly shocked the world. She literally sat next to his bleeding body in the lobby, just casually smoking a cigarette and making a phone call, completely covered in blood. And it gets crazier. A massive online subculture started hailing her as a real-life yandere, totally glorifying her violent crime and even raising thousands of dollars for her defense. It is a stark, eye-opening look at how internet subcultures can validate extreme violence.
Okay, let's pull back the curtain on Section 4, the hidden underworld. The desperate anonymity of the dark web can so easily unite random, highly dangerous individuals. Just consider this. Blinded by financial panic, 3 men who were deep in debt met on illegal forums to plot a totally random kidnapping and robbery. Tragically, they abducted a hardworking 31-year-old office worker named Ri Aizogai as she was just walking home. They ultimately murdered her for a mere 62,000 yen, which is the equivalent of about $450. It brutally illustrates how this hidden digital underworld can violently crash into the safe, everyday reality of completely innocent citizens. But, there are also physical underworlds hiding right in plain sight, like the incredibly vulnerable host and hostess club ecosystem. Now, while it's a super lucrative industry based officially on just paid conversation and PG flirting, it heavily relies on something called dohans. These are mandatory dinner dates with clients. And as outlined in our source material, this creates highly vulnerable environments. It essentially forces young workers to meet privately with clients off-site, creating scenarios that are utterly ripe for exploitation by wealthy predators.
The tragic vulnerability of that system is just undeniably obvious in the case of Lucy Blackman. She was a British flight attendant who moved to Tokyo to work as a hostess in May of 2000, and she vanished just 2 months later on one of those Dohan dates. Her client was Joji Obara, a serial predator who used his immense wealth and the hostess system to drug and assault women for years. Tragically, her dismembered body was found in January 2001. And to make matters even worse, the tragedy was vastly exacerbated by the initial police response. They completely dismissed her disappearance, just assuming she had run off, which really highlights the severe blind spots in the justice system when it comes to dealing with the nightlife industry.
This leads us to our final point, Section 5, the illusion of safety.
Take a look at this table. When we compare these distinct national tragedies, we really start to see how strict norms and geopolitical arrangements often suppress victims and obscure the hidden reality. In the Sagamihara massacre, a former employee murdered 19 disabled residents. But because of intense cultural stigma, the victims were actually left unnamed to protect their family's privacy, and officials completely refused to classify it as a hate crime. Then, look at the Okinawa murder, where 20-year-old Rina Shimabukuro was killed by a U.S. Marine. This devastating crime ignited massive protests against the huge U.S. military base presence on the island. In both of these cases, the societal response was heavily filtered through strict cultural and geopolitical lenses, basically masking the deeper systemic issues at play.
So as we wrap up and reflect on these extreme anomalies, we really have to ask ourselves, at what cost does a society maintain its perfect facade when a culture demands absolute perfection, relentless productivity, and total conformity? What terrifying pressures are quietly boiling just beneath the surface? The source material leaves us with a pretty terrifying thought to chew on. Is it possible that the very mechanisms that make a nation extraordinarily safe are the exact same ones that, when they finally fracture, create its absolute darkest shadows?